My name is Chloe, and for the past 20 years, I've been living quietly beside my twin sister, Victoria. Though it often felt more like living in her shadow. We were born on the same day, and to an outsider, we might look nearly identical. However, the similarities between us end just there. Victoria has always been the sun of our family, bright, energetic, and universally adored. In contrast, I've always related more to the moon, quiet, introspective, and often obscured by her radiance. Our parents, Ethan and Sophie, saw Victoria as the epitome of perfection. She shone in her academics, thrived in various clubs and societies, and had a magnetic personality that made her the center of attention wherever she went. As for me, I was often referred to as the other daughter, not as brilliant, not as outgoing, not as flawless as Victoria. From a young age, I yearned desperately for my parents' attention. I pushed myself in my studies and even dabbled in sports, but no matter what I did, I couldn't step out of Victoria's shadow. The phrase, "Chloe, why can't you be more like Victoria?" became a recurring soundtrack in my life, each repetition chipping away at my heart. Victoria and I lived worlds apart, despite sharing the same home. Her world was vivid and full of adoration and friends, while mine felt dim, lonely, and filled with a deep longing. This contrast grew sharper in high school. Victoria soared as the student body president and a recipient of numerous awards. I, on the other hand, found solace in the art club, often tucked away in a corner, sketching scenes from my imagination. Art became my refuge, the one place where I wasn't compared to anyone else. Yet even my passion for art was met with indifference by our parents. Art? What future is there in that? My father often remarked, pointing out Victoria's path to medical school as the blueprint for a successful future. Every dismissal made me retreat further into myself, feeling both ashamed of my supposed shortcomings and resentful of their inability to appreciate who I was, not just who I wasn't. Victoria loved me, I never doubted that, but her attempts to bridge our gap sometimes only deepened it. Her words of comfort often felt patronizing, unintentionally reinforcing the differences between us. "It's okay, Chloe, you have other talents," she'd say. But I could always hear the unspoken, "but not as much as me," lingering in the air. At our high school graduation, Victoria delivered a speech as the valedictorian. I watched from the audience, feeling invisible as our parents beamed at her with pride. Later, they threw a grand party to celebrate her achievements, and I retreated to my room to draw, unnoticed and unmissed. That night, as I lay in bed, the realization of having spent 20 years overshadowed by Victoria weighed heavily on me. The pain was suffocating, but within it, I found a spark of determination. No more living in shadows. No more conforming to expectations that felt alien to my true self. It was time to forge my path, to find value and meaning in my life on my terms. I vowed then to step into my light, no matter how daunting that might seem. This was the beginning of living my life, not as a secondary character in someone else's story, but as the protagonist of my own. At the time, I didn't realize how profound the decision I made that night would be. Nor could I have predicted how it would unravel hidden aspects of our family dynamics. Just a week after graduation, our lives began veering in an unexpected direction. It was at a routine breakfast that my father, with a suddenness that caught us all off guard, stood to make an announcement. To celebrate Victoria's outstanding academic achievements, he declared with a proud smile, we decided to take a family vacation to Florida. Victoria's reaction was a burst of joy, and my mother's eyes glistened with tears of pride. I, on the other hand, just absent-mindedly stirred my cereal, feeling detached from their excitement. Then, turning towards me, my father added, "Chloe, we need you to stay home and watch the house." At that moment, it felt as though time had ground to a halt. The joyous cheers from Victoria and the soft sobs from my mother seemed to fade into the background, leaving only my father's words echoing in my ears. "House sitter," was all I could manage to muster. "Yes," my father replied nonchalantly. "Someone has to look after the house, right? Besides, this trip is a celebration for Victoria. You understand, right?" Understand what? What was there to understand? I had graduated, just like Victoria. I was also a part of this family. But in that moment, the stark reality that I was not truly seen as such hit me hard. I understand, I responded in a barely audible voice, my words heavy with unspoken hurt. That evening, as my family bustled around packing their suitcases, I retreated to my room and turned to my canvas. My brushstrokes were heavy, loaded with the weight of anger, sadness, and isolation. As I painted, there was a knock at the door. Victoria entered, her voice tinged with concern. "Chloe, are you okay?" Without turning to face her, I replied, "Yeah, I'm fine." "Have fun." Victoria hesitated, then softly added, "I'm sorry. I talked to Dad, but—" "It's okay," I interrupted, not wanting to prolong the conversation or feel more diminished. "I'm fine. Go and enjoy your trip." She sighed, seemingly unsure of what else to say, and left the room. Although I appreciated that she had tried to speak to our father on my behalf, it ultimately didn't change anything. My presence, or lack thereof, seemed insignificant to them. The next morning, as my family prepared to leave, the house felt unnervingly silent. My mother embraced me briefly, murmuring, "Take care," while my father simply patted my shoulder without a word. Victoria gave me an apologetic look, but soon they were all gone. As the door closed behind them, the silence of the house enveloped me. For the first time, I was completely alone, left to navigate the solitude and the stark realization of where I stood within my family. This newfound isolation, though painful, sparked a resolve within me to pursue a path where I could be valued for who I am, not overshadowed by someone else's achievements. During that week alone, I experienced a peculiar blend of loneliness and liberation. For the first 3 days, I remained holed up in my room, my attention solely devoted to my drawing. Time seemed to dissolve around me, meals were forgotten as I lost myself in the world of canvas and colors. On the 3rd day, I ventured outside, walking through the local park under a sprawling blue sky. I wondered idly if the sky in Florida was an even deeper shade of blue. But it was on the 4th morning that my ordinary solitude was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my reverie. I opened the door to find a woman whose face bore a striking resemblance to an older version of my mother. "Hello, Chloe," she greeted me with a warm smile. "I'm your mother's cousin, Lucy." I was taken aback. A cousin of my mother's? This was news to me. Lucy's presence was unexpected, yet there was a kindness in her eyes that made me step aside to let her in. As she entered the living room, her gaze quickly fell on the paintings I had hung on the walls. "These are wonderful," she exclaimed. "Did you draw these?" I nodded, a bit shyly admitting, "Yes, it's just a hobby." Lucy looked at me intently. "It's not just a hobby, Chloe. This is talent." Her words resonated within me, striking a chord that my parents' comments never had. Lucy began to ask about my paintings, the techniques I used, my sources of inspiration, and even my dreams for the future. Gradually, I found myself opening up more than I had in a long time. Talking to Lucy felt like conversing with a longtime friend. Her eyes sparkled with understanding and empathy. "Chloe," Lucy said earnestly, "you have a great talent. You should have the opportunity to develop it." She then reached into her wallet and pulled out a check. "This is for nurturing your talent," she said as she handed it to me. I was astounded when I saw the amount, $100,000. It seemed unreal. "But I can't accept this," I stammered, overwhelmed. Lucy's smile was gentle yet firm. "Take it. This is an investment in your future. I believe in you." Tears welled up in my eyes. For the first time in my life, someone not only recognized my talent but also believed in my potential. After Lucy left, I sat for a long time, staring at the check. The implications of accepting it were huge. It could change my life. Yet with it came a swirl of anxiety. How would my parents react if they knew? What would Victoria think? Why had Lucy chosen this moment to step into my life and offer such a generous gift? These unanswered questions lingered in my mind. But one thing was clear, a significant change was on the horizon. When my family returned from Florida, I was gripped by a mix of excitement and dread. How would I explain Lucy's visit and the check? Was there even a need to explain? As I heard the front door open and their cheerful voices filled the space, the reality of the moment hit me. Victoria entered first, her face sun-kissed and beaming. "Chloe, I'm back," she exclaimed, moving in for a hug. I hesitated, stepping back slightly, which caused a fleeting shadow of confusion to cross her face. However, she quickly recovered with her usual bright smile. Our parents followed, laden with luggage. My mother appeared particularly weary. At that moment, the dynamics of our family, the contrast between us and the potential impact of Lucy's gift, loomed large, shaping the next chapter of my life in ways I had yet to fully understand. As my family returned home, their faces glowing with the residual joy of their trip, my father maintained his usual composed demeanor. "Was everything okay at home?" he asked, his voice carrying a tone of formal concern. "Everything was fine," I responded, my tone more dismissive than intended. "Good," he nodded, and just like that, the topic was closed. As they unpacked, laughter and stories filled the air. Their shared memories of Florida created a bubble of happiness from which I felt utterly excluded. I observed them from a distance, my sense of alienation growing stronger. At dinner, while they continued to relive their adventures, I remained silent. My thoughts swirled with doubts about my place in this family. However, the semblance of peace was shattered when my mother, sifting through a pile of mail, suddenly raised her voice. "What's this?" She held up a check, confusion and curiosity etched on her face. My heart skipped a beat. I had completely forgotten about Lucy's check in the chaos of their return. My father took the check, his eyes widening as he read the amount, $100,000, addressed to Chloe. "What is this all about?" The room's atmosphere turned icy in an instant. Victoria's face registered shock, and suspicion flickered in our parents' eyes. Taking a deep breath, I began to explain about Lucy's unexpected visit, how she admired my paintings, and her belief in my talent, which led her to give me the check to support my artistic pursuits. After my explanation, a heavy silence hung over the room. It seemed to stretch endlessly until Victoria finally spoke. Her voice tinged with a sharpness I hadn't expected. "Isn't that unfair, to receive such a large sum from a stranger while we were away?" I was stunned by her words. Her tone clearly jealous. "Victoria," I replied quietly, trying to maintain my composure. "You received the gift of a trip to Florida. This is a gift for me, but it's not just yours." "Chloe," my father interjected sharply. "What's with that attitude? Apologize to Victoria." At that moment, something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed emotions came flooding out. "Apologize to me?" I stood up, my voice trembling with pent-up frustration. Who should be apologizing? Who has always disregarded me, cherished only Victoria, never recognized my talent, and continued to ignore my existence? My outburst left my parents staring in surprise, and Victoria looked on the verge of tears. "You all," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "have you ever truly loved me, or have I just been Victoria's shadow to you?" My mother opened her mouth to speak, possibly to soothe the tension, but the air was already thick with revelations and raw emotions, signaling a turning point in our family dynamics. This confrontation, though painful, was a necessary eruption of truths long buried under the surface of our seemingly perfect family facade. But I cut her off. "That's enough. I can no longer be part of a family like this." With those words, I ran to my room, my emotions overwhelming me. Once inside, I closed the door, collapsed onto my bed, and let the tears I had held back for so long flow freely. After some time, I heard a knock at the door. It was Victoria. Her voice soft and shaky. "Chloe, can we talk?" I hesitated, still raw from our earlier confrontation, but eventually, I opened the door. Victoria stood there, her eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I've been struggling too." I waited, letting her find the words she needed. The expectations our parents set for us are too heavy, but I was envious of you. You seem to live so freely." Her confession took me by surprise. It had never occurred to me that Victoria could feel envious of my life. "We really didn't understand each other," I murmured. Victoria nodded and stepped closer. Then, suddenly, she hugged me. "Can't we start over?" she whispered. "As real sisters?" I hugged her back and quietly nodded, feeling the years of misunderstandings and jealousy begin to wash away with our tears. However, the poignant moment of reconciliation was short-lived. The next day, at breakfast, our father began with a grave expression that immediately set us on edge. "Chloe, Victoria, there's something I need to tell you," he said cautiously. "About the woman yesterday, Lucy." He paused, searching for the right words. "The truth is, she is your real mother." The room seemed to freeze. Victoria and I stiffened, the words striking us like a bolt of lightning. "What do you mean?" Victoria asked, her voice trembling. Our mother, who had raised us, began to explain through her tears. "She and Lucy are sisters. Lucy became pregnant while unmarried. When you were conceived, to protect the family's reputation, they decided to have you adopted by us." "But why now?" I managed to stammer out. "Lucy was recently diagnosed with a serious illness," she explained. "She wanted you to know the truth." This revelation turned our world upside down. Everything we had believed about ourselves and our family collapsed in an instant. I stood up, needing air, and staggered out of the room. Victoria followed, and together we went out to the garden, sitting silently side by side. As we sat there, a mix of indescribable emotions swirled within us. Victoria finally spoke. "Chloe," she said quietly, "what should we do now?" I let out a deep breath. "Honestly, I don't know. But there's one thing I'm sure of." "What's that?" she asked. "That we have each other." Victoria gave a small smile and squeezed my hand. In that moment, I felt that we truly became sisters, not just by blood, but connected by heart, bound together through shared trials and revelations. This newfound bond, forged in the most unexpected circumstances, seemed to promise that whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. In the weeks following the shocking revelation about our true parentage, our home transformed into an arena of quiet upheaval. On the surface, life proceeded as usual, but beneath the routine, Victoria and I were bridging the gap that had long separated us. We spent more hours together than ever, unraveling years of misunderstandings and sharing parts of our lives previously hidden from each other. One afternoon, Victoria knocked on my door. "Chloe," she began, a curious tone in her voice. "I want to see more of your paintings." I hesitated at first, but then I opened my sketchbook to her eager eyes. She pored over each page with a focused intensity. "This is amazing," she exclaimed. "Why didn't you show me these sooner?" I shrugged, a mix of resignation and old reflexes flaring up. "I thought no one would be interested." Victoria's face fell slightly, tinged with regret. "I'm sorry I never noticed your talent." Her acknowledgement felt like a balm to the old wounds of neglect. Finally, someone recognized the passion that I had kept to myself. Meanwhile, our relationship with our adoptive parents, Ethan and Sophie, remained strained. They were remorseful, repeatedly expressing regret over their previous indifference towards me. However, the deep-seated feelings of being overlooked in favor of Victoria weren't easily dismissed. One evening after dinner, Ethan approached me tentatively. "Chloe, about your paintings, could I see your work, if you don't mind?" His voice held a note of earnest pleading. "Why are you interested in my paintings now?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with years of accumulated hurt. Ethan sighed deeply, the weight of his errors seeming to bear down on him. "We made many mistakes, and overlooking your talent was one of them," he admitted. I thought it might not be too late to start. His regret appeared genuine, but my heart was still guarded. "I'll think about it," I replied, retreating to my room. That night, I wrestled with my feelings, debating whether I could ever forgive Ethan and Sophie and possibly rebuild our relationship. Despite the complexities of my feelings toward my adoptive parents, one thing became crystal clear: I was no longer willing to live in anyone's shadow. My life was my own to shape. The following day, I invited Victoria on a special outing, our destination, Lucy's house, our biological mother's home. As we rang the doorbell, we held each other's hands tightly, a silent pact of mutual support. The door swung open, and there stood Lucy, tears immediately springing to her eyes. "Chloe, Victoria," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "Thank you for coming." We stepped forward and embraced her, a flood of complex emotions washing over us. Though words were scarce, the hug spoke volumes. Healing the years of separation and filling the void of missed connections would take time, but as we stood there connected by an unspoken bond, it felt like the first step towards mending the fragmented parts of our shared history. As we crossed the threshold into Lucy's home, a realm where her soul was laid bare on canvas walls, the ambience of creativity enveloped us. She was an artist, just like me. The sight of her paintings, which captured so much emotion and color, immediately drew us in. Settling into the familiar comfort of her living room, we were surrounded by the vibrant evidence of her life's passion. Lucy's voice trembled as she began to recount her past. "When you were conceived, I was young and overwhelmed. I didn't believe I could provide you with the life you deserved." Victoria and I listened in silence, absorbing the weight of her words. Lucy spoke of the choices she made, the life she led afterward, and how she had always kept a watchful eye on us from afar. "But my decision must have hurt you," she said, her eyes glistening with tears as she turned toward me. "Especially you, Chloe. I'm so sorry." Taking a deep breath, I responded, "Lucy, no, Mom. We've faced many challenges, but I appreciate that you recognized my talent and finally shared the truth with us." Victoria nodded in agreement, adding, "We have time now to get to know each other. We can take it slow." Relief washed over Lucy's face as she embraced us once more, a gesture that felt like it was mending years of separation with each second. From that day forward, Victoria and I began visiting Lucy regularly. She taught us painting techniques and shared stories of her life. Gradually, we deepened our bond. It was a new chapter of learning and understanding, of growing closer, not just as a family, but as artists sharing a deep-rooted passion. However, our relationship with Ethan and Sophie remained fraught with complexity. Despite their attempts to reconnect and make amends, the weight of past years was heavy, and simple resolutions seemed beyond reach. One day, Sophie came to my room, her voice laden with anxiety. "Chloe, can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated but opened the door. She entered and paused, her eyes roaming over my paintings. After a moment, she began to cry. "I'm sorry, Chloe," she sobbed. "I overlooked your talent, ignored your feelings. I was not the mother you needed." I sat beside her, my mind a tumult of emotions, but my voice calm. "I wasn't perfect either," I admitted. "But what matters is what we do from here." Sophie looked at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You're right. Can we start over?" However, the scars were deep. I appreciated her desire to make amends, but the years of feeling unvalued and overshadowed couldn't be easily forgotten. Forgiveness, for now, felt out of reach. The next day, I made a significant decision. Gathering Ethan, Sophie, and Victoria together, I said, "I think it's time for me to leave this house." The room fell into stunned silence. When Ethan and Sophie began to object, trying to persuade me to stay, I knew they didn't fully understand my need for space, to heal, to grow, and to explore my identity away from the shadows of the past. Leaving was not an act of abandonment but an essential step toward finding my path. A path where I could forge an identity, not defined by comparison or obscured by another's brilliance. This was my chance to discover who Chloe was, on my terms, at my pace. My decision was firm, and a few days later, as I was preparing to leave the house, I shared my plans with Victoria. "I'm going to art college," I announced, a mix of nervousness and excitement in my voice. Her response was immediate and supportive. "You should definitely pursue your talent. We'll support your decision all the way," she said, wrapping me in an enthusiastic hug. Congratulations, big sister. You're going to be a fantastic artist. A few months later, I enrolled in an art college and began living on my own. The new environment of the campus was a breath of fresh air, a place where I could truly explore and express my artistic abilities without any reservations. Meanwhile, Victoria embarked on her journey, starting medical school. As each of us pursued our passions, my relationship with Lucy also grew stronger. She became an integral part of our lives, her presence a constant source of encouragement and inspiration. One day, my artwork was featured at a university exhibition. To my surprise and delight, both Victoria and Lucy came to see it. Watching them standing in front of my paintings, visibly moved, filled my heart with warmth and a profound sense of belonging. I realized then that despite the complexities and the scars, this was my family. The exhibition was more than just a display of my work. It was a testament to the journey we had all undertaken together. The imperfections and challenges of our past were part of us, but they did not define us. By embracing our reality and moving forward, we were building something stronger. Victoria came up beside me and took my hand. Her presence was reassuring. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she whispered. I smiled, feeling the truth of her words deep in my soul. "Yes, we have. But the real beginning starts now." In that moment, surrounded by my art and the two most important women in my life, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity and purpose. The future was uncertain, but it was filled with possibilities. And I was ready to face it with courage and hope. This was not just a new chapter in my life, it was a fresh start for all of us, a chance to redefine what it meant to be a family and to support each other in our individual aspirations and dreams.